What is the difference between a startup and a small business? And why is it important to you? Let's talk about it now! Hi, I'm Oliver and welcome back to the channel Ask Me Startup, where we talk about startups, small businesses, and the world that surrounds them. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and pushing the notification bell so YouTube lets you know whenever I'm uploading new content. If you're into business, if you have a small business, if you plan to start a business, please feel free to download my free startup checklist, link in the description below. Today's topic is a very relevant topic because I'm getting so many emails from you, and thank you for everybody who's writing me an email. I'm always happy to reply and help you out if I can do so. And people are always confused with a startup and a small business. Why is that important? I will come to that at the end of this video, of course, but let's first talk about what are the main differences between a startup and a small business. Some call a startup a grow fast, exponential, technology-based new company. Now, that might be true for some, but it might not necessarily be true for all. But there is a truth in it. Usually, startups tend to disrupt or try to disrupt an existing market and grow fast. Think of Airbnb, think of how the travel industry has been prior Airbnb, and think how it's going to be past Airbnb. Whereas a small business usually tends to be different. They tend to enter an existing market on a local scale. But there are other differences as well. Number one, the growth intent. Now, of course, we are aware that startups usually have to grow fast and big. That's why they're looking for large markets, $1 billion, trillion-dollar market if possible. Why? Because at the end, you will never have the whole market. You will only get a fraction of it. And to be attractive enough for investors to give you money in exchange for equity, you need to have a large market to address to. Whereas if you are a small business owner, you might want to have a normal growth, just enough that you get positive revenue, that you can pay yourself and your employees, and still have a decent and attractive business. Which brings me to the next topic, which would be the business objectives. Now, the business objectives on a startup has to be in a disruptive area. You will have to have new ideas that have not been tested yet, and you're trying to make them work. Whereas the business objectives of a small business is to get positive revenue, to have a local distribution, and maybe grow slowly and steadily over your local area. You leave the small business once your business has grown to a national importance. Still, then you're not a startup, you're still a medium-sized company maybe at that time. The next differentiation point would be the end goal, because most of the startups are actually looking for an exit. An exit meaning another company, another person, another investment fund, whatsoever is buying the equity of your startup, of you and all the investors, and you are then free to go, and they will continue developing that business model for you. Whereas as a small business owner, your end game might be infinity. You might want to have that business going on forever and hand it over to the next generation, if they are interested, of course. The next differentiation point is funding. Now, funding for a startup will be different from a small business. Why? Let's face it, if you're a startup, you want to disrupt markets, you want to try out or figure out which business model actually works. Because there is no blueprint, nobody has ever tested this, you need some venture capital. You need angel investors, etc. How are they actually able to pay you or give you some money for exchange for what if you don't have a market? The only thing you can hand them over is equity. Now, equity does make sense to hand over in a startup, and you can do that round after round after round, but one day you will lose control of it because you've handed over too much equity to other partners and now they are in control. Whereas if you are a small business, your funding is actually more derived from asset loans, from business loans or public grants, etc. Anything that is not diluting your equity. Why? Because you want to keep control of your business for eternity if possible. Then of course, there's another differentiation factor, that is the level of risk. A startup usually is a high risk, high reward program. You try out something new, you try out something that you think makes sense, that the investors believe makes sense, and you might win or you might fail. Most of the time you will fail. Let's face it, for VCs, somewhere between 20 to 10% of their investments only make it through an IPO, hence they are in a somewhat established market at that time. Meaning 80 to 90% of their investment actually dissolve themselves into nothing. Whereas in a small business, your risk level depends on what type of business you're talking to, but it is normally in an established market, so the risk is more on, are you addressing the right people? Do you do the right business? Do you offer the right products for the people that are around you or not? Think of small businesses as your hairdresser salon, your auto repair shop, your plumber, your local flower shop. If you plan to do any of these, let's say, very traditional businesses, you are not entitled for the startup visa. Why? Because startups, by the definition of the countries that enable you those visas, actually are looking for disruptive technologies, for something unproven, for something new, something that can generate 1,000,000 trillion jobs. Why is that important? Because you have to be aware that actually the backbone on any European economy currently are the small and medium-sized businesses. 60% plus of employees work in these businesses. But what they're actually looking into is to generate more or new jobs, and hence for that they need startups because they can grow exponentially. And this exponential growth means also exponential job growth, means stability for the country and their retirement programs, etc., etc. So, if you want to start a business in Europe, you're free to do so, but you might want to go a different visa route if you're from outside the EU, if you want to start a small business, compared to the startup visa programs that are available that specifically address new sophisticated approaches to current problems. All right, everybody, I hope this short video was helpful to you to be able to understand the difference between a startup and a small business. If you like the content so far, please smash the like button and subscribe. And I'm going to see you in the next video. Bye!